The radio crackled once, then died. Operations at Bagram stirred awake under bruised dawn light, the kind that made shadows look like threats. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hale stood at the operations desk, staring at a blinking cursor on the tactical display. Flight Vanguard 7 had gone silent 12 minutes ago. No mayday, no position update, just the flat hum of dead air where a voice should have been. The F-16 assigned to close air support over Coast Province had simply vanished from radar, and with it, a four-man special operations team pinned down in a valley the locals called the Anvil. Hale's jaw tightened. He'd sent good people into that meat grinder, and now the only asset capable of pulling them out was a ghost. Outside, the tarmac shimmered with heat that hadn't yet burned off from yesterday. A tech sergeant approached, clipboard in hand, eyes uncertain. "Sir, we've got an inbound from Kandahar. ETA 8 minutes. It's Warhawk." Hale didn't look up. "Warhawk's been grounded for 3 months." The sergeant shifted his weight. "She's airborne, sir, cleared by General Sutton himself." That made Hale's head snap up. Warhawk. The call sign belonged to Captain Rivkas Sokolov, a pilot with more combat hours than most squadron commanders and a jacket thick with incident reports that read like poetry to some, insubordination to others. She'd flown close air support in places where the term "danger close" was a polite suggestion. But after a hard landing in Helmand that left her with a fractured vertebra and a medical board questioning her flight status, she'd been sidelined, officially recovering, unofficially forgotten. Hale had always respected her skill, even if he'd never understood the cold distance she kept from everyone. Now she was the only pilot in range with the ordnance and the insanity to thread the Anvil's narrow approach corridor under direct fire. He exhaled through his nose, a sound that carried more resignation than relief. "Get me a direct line the second she's overhead." The sergeant nodded and left. Hale returned his gaze to the map. The valley was a death trap, walled on 3 sides by rock faces that funneled wind and bullets with equal cruelty. Vanguard 7's last known position put the team in a dried riverbed, surrounded, ammunition running low. They needed fire support, and they needed it from someone who understood that flying low and slow in a gunfight wasn't bravery. It was calculation. It was Rivkas Sokolov. Minutes passed like held breath. Then the radio hissed to life. "Bagram Actual, this is Warhawk. I'm 3 minutes out. Somebody want to tell me what kind of party I'm invited to?" The voice was calm, almost bored, with a faint Slavic accent that turned certain vowels into edges. Hale grabbed the handset. "Warhawk, Bagram Actual. We have troops in contact, grid November Delta 7349. Heavy small arms, possible RPGs. Vanguard 7 went off comms 12 minutes ago. You're all they've got." There was a pause just long enough for the weight of it to settle. "Copy Actual, I'll bring them home." No bravado, no jokes, just a promise delivered in the same tone someone might use to order coffee. Hale found that more reassuring than any burst of confidence. He switched frequencies, patching into the ground team's channel. Static, then a strained voice. "Any station, this is Dagger 2-1. We are danger close, repeat, danger close. 5 wounded, ammunition critical. If someone's coming, now would be good." Hale keyed the mic. "Dagger, Warhawk inbound. 60 seconds, mark your position with smoke." "Roger," popping red. On the horizon, a shape emerged, low and blunt, trailing a sound that felt like rolling thunder compressed into sheet metal. The A-10 Thunderbolt II came in ugly, the way all functional things do. Twin engines mounted high, a nose that looked like it had been beaten with hammers, and under the fuselage the GAU-8 Avenger cannon, a weapon so absurdly powerful it could shred vehicles into modern art. The aircraft was painted in faded camouflage, streaked with exhaust stains and the scars of 100 missions. On the nose, barely visible, was a small emblem, a raven clutching a sword. Rivkas' bird. She'd named it Thorn, though no one called it that except her. Hale watched the aircraft drop lower, skimming terrain with the kind of confidence that made air traffic controllers nervous. She wasn't showboating. She was staying under the radar envelope, denying the enemy advance warning. It was textbook. It was also borderline suicidal. The valley opened beneath her like a mouth. Smoke rose in a thin red column from the riverbed. Around it, muzzle flashes flickered like fireflies in daylight. Rivka's voice came through again, quieter now, focused. Dagger Warhawk has visual. Guns, guns, guns. The Avenger roared. It wasn't a sound. It was a physical thing, a mechanical bellow that rattled bones and loosened teeth. 70 rounds per second, each one the size of a milk bottle designed to crack tanks open like walnuts. The earth along the western ridge erupted in geysers of dust and stone. Bodies tumbled, weapons flew. The enemy scattered like insects under a boot. Rivka pulled up, banking hard left, the A-10 groaning under G-forces it was never meant to love. Tracers followed her, green threads stitching the sky. She didn't flinch, didn't weave dramatically. She adjusted her angle with surgical precision, minimizing her profile, maximizing theirs. Another pass, another storm of metal. The ridgeline went silent. Hale listened to the ground team's chatter, voices shifting from desperation to disbelief. Holy shit, Warhawk, you just deleted half the mountain. Dagger, say status. 5 wounded stable, ready for extract. You just bought us breathing room. Rivka's tone remained flat. Roger, stay tight. I'm your umbrella until the hellos arrive. She circled the valley, a predator keeping watch, her aircraft silhouette framed against the pale morning. Hale could picture her in the cockpit, eyes scanning instruments and terrain with equal distrust, hands steady on the stick. She wasn't the kind of pilot who trusted luck. She trusted math, fuel calculations, and the knowledge that hesitation killed more people than bullets. The rescue birds came in low, Blackhawks with door guns manned and ready. Rivka held position, daring anything with a weapon to make a move. Nothing did. The wounded were loaded, the team extracted, and within minutes the valley was empty again, just wind and dust and the lingering smell of cordite. Bagram actual, Warhawk, mission complete, returning to base. Hale allowed himself a breath. Good work, Warhawk, welcome back. There was silence on the other end, long enough that he thought she'd switched off. Then quieter than before, never left actual, just had to remember how to walk. The line went dead. Hale set the handset down, something unspoken tightening in his chest. The A-10 touched down 30 minutes later, tires kissing asphalt with a squeal that echoed across the tarmac. Ground crew rushed forward, chalking wheels, running fuel lines, inspecting the scarred underbelly for fresh damage. There was always damage. Thorn wore its history openly. Rivka climbed down slowly, each movement deliberate, her flight suit dark with sweat. She was shorter than most expected, compact and wiry, with black hair pulled into a tight bun and a face that gave nothing away. Her eyes were gray, the kind that reflected light without warmth. She walked with a slight hitch, a reminder of the vertebra that had healed crooked despite the surgeon's best efforts. No one approached her immediately. They never did. She had a reputation for being difficult, unapproachable, a pilot who spoke only when spoken to and preferred aircraft to people. It wasn't arrogance. It was something quieter, more deliberate, a choice to exist at a distance. Hale met her at the debriefing room, a cramped space that smelled of burnt coffee and old paperwork. She sat across from him, hands folded, expression neutral. You went off script, Hale said, not unkindly. Rivka shrugged, a minimal gesture. Script assumed Vanguard would be there. It wasn't. I adapted. By flying into a hot LZ with minimal ordnance and no backup. I had 30mm, that's not minimal. Hale almost smiled, almost. You're lucky General Sutton cleared you. The medical board wasn't happy. Rivka's gaze didn't waver. Medical boards don't fight wars, Colonel, pilots do. It wasn't defiance. It was fact delivered with the certainty of someone who'd spent years proving it. Hale leaned back, studying her. Why'd you come back? You could have taken the medical discharge, full benefits, quiet retirement. Instead, you fought for flight status like it was the last seat on a lifeboat. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not softness, but acknowledgement, because I'm not done. With what? Flying, fighting, mattering. She said it simply, without melodrama. Hale understood then. For Rivka, the cockpit wasn't escape, it was identity. The base settled into its rhythm, 1,000 tasks bleeding into the next. Rivka disappeared into the routine, pre-flight checks and maintenance logs, her presence more felt than seen. Other pilots gave her space, some out of respect, others uncertainty. She didn't join the evening card games, didn't share war stories over lukewarm beer. She existed parallel to the squadron, competent but apart. It bothered some of the younger pilots, the ones who mistook silence for arrogance. Lieutenant Garrett Voss, a hotshot F-16 jockey with more confidence than flight hours, was among them. He'd heard the stories about Warhawk, the legendary close air support runs, the medals quietly pinned to a uniform she never wore to ceremonies. He'd also heard she was washed up, held together by painkillers and stubbornness. One evening in the pilot's lounge, emboldened by boredom and bravado, Voss made a comment loud enough for the room to hear. "Heard Warhawk's back. Guess they'll let anyone fly if they're desperate enough." A few pilots glanced up uneasy. Rivka sat in the corner reading a maintenance manual, her expression unchanged. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge. Voss, interpreting silence as weakness, continued. "I mean no offense, but the A-10's a relic, might as well strap guns to a tractor. Real combat requires speed, precision, not whatever she does." Rivka turned a page, still didn't look up. Another pilot, Captain Nia Akaffer, a Black Hawk pilot with more common sense than most, spoke quietly. "Voss, shut up." But Voss was already committed, his voice carrying. "I'm just saying maybe some people should know when to hang it up, let the real pilots handle it." That's when Rivka finally looked up. Her gaze was calm, clinical, the way a surgeon might assess a wound. "You ever fly close air support, Lieutenant?" Voss blinked, caught off guard. "I've done interdiction runs." "That's a no." She closed the manual, setting it aside. Close air support means flying low, slow, in range of everything that wants to kill you while friendly forces are meters away. It means you don't get to run. You don't get to climb out. You stay until the job is done or you're dead. Speed doesn't save you. Precision does. Voss opened his mouth, but Rivka wasn't finished. "You fly an F-16. Fast, clean, high altitude. You drop ordnance from 20,000 feet and never see the faces of the people you're helping. I fly an A-10. I see everything, the smoke, the blood. The moment someone realizes they're going to live because I showed up, that's not a relic, Lieutenant, that's a promise." The room had gone quiet. Rivka stood, her movements unhurried, and walked out without another word. Voss sat frozen, his bravado deflated. Akaffer leaned over, her voice low. "She saved an entire platoon today while you were filing flight reports. Maybe show some respect." Voss said nothing. Outside, Rivka walked the flight line, the night air cool against her skin. She stopped near Thorn, running her hand along the battered nose. The metal was cold, familiar. She didn't need validation, didn't need applause. She needed this. The smell of fuel, the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that tomorrow someone might need her to be exactly what she was, a pilot who wouldn't walk away. Behind her, footsteps approached. Hale heard there was a moment in the lounge. Rivka didn't turn. Moments pass. Voss is an idiot, but he's not wrong about one thing. The A-10's old. There's talk about phasing them out entirely. There's always talk. Hale stepped beside her, gazing at the aircraft. "You ever think about what comes next, after the flying stops?" Rivka considered the question, then shook her head. "No. Why not?" "Because I'm not finished." It was the same answer she'd given before, but Hale heard the weight beneath it now. For Rivka, flying wasn't career. It was oxygen. He didn't press further. Some people couldn't be understood from a distance. They had to be watched mission by mission until the shape of their purpose became clear. "Get some rest, Captain. We've got tasking in the morning." Rivka nodded, still staring at her aircraft. Hale left her there, a silhouette against the night, and wondered how many more flights she had left before the body or the bureaucracy finally said enough. He suspected she wondered the same thing, and kept flying anyway. The mission brief came at 0500, delivered in a room that smelled like stale sweat and anxiety. Hale stood at the front, pointer in hand, a map of the Kunar province projected behind him. Red circles marked enemy positions. Blue squares marked friendly units. The space between them was narrow and unforgiving. "Listen up. We've got a situation developing along the Pakistan border. Delta team went in yesterday to gather intel on a high-value target. They've been compromised. Heavy contact, 4 wounded, extraction complicated by terrain and weather. CAS assets are limited. Warhawk your primary." Rivka sat in the second row, arms crossed, eyes on the map. She didn't react to the assignment, didn't nod or acknowledge. She was already running calculations, wind speed and approach angles, fuel and ammunition ratios. Hale continued. The valley's tight. High ridges on both sides, single entry point. Visibility's going to be poor, cloud cover at 8,000 feet. Row is tight. Friendlies will be marked with infrared strobes but expect civilians in the area. Positive identification before engaging. A hand went up. Lieutenant Voss, still stinging from the previous night. Sir, why not send fast movers? F-16s can deliver precision munitions without the risk. Hale's expression didn't change. Because precision munitions don't loiter, Lieutenant. Delta needs an aircraft that can stay on station, provide sustained fire, and adjust in real time. That's the A-10, that's Warhawk. Voss subsided, jaw tight. Rivka still didn't look at him. Hale wrapped up the brief, assignments given, frequencies distributed. As the room emptied, Rivka remained seated, staring at the map. Hale approached. You good? She nodded once. Weather's going to be a problem. Forecast says it'll clear by 0800. Forecasts lie. Hale almost smiled. You've flown worse. Doesn't make it smart. But she stood, gathering her gear, and Hale knew she'd go anyway. Smart didn't factor into it. Necessary did. By 0630, Rivka was in the cockpit, running through pre-flight checks with the methodical precision of ritual. Switches flipped, gauges tapped, systems humming to life. Outside, the ground crew finished their work, giving thumbs-up signals. She returned without enthusiasm. The engine ignition was a controlled explosion, twin turbofans roaring into existence with a sound that made conversations impossible. She let the engines warm, monitoring temperatures, listening to the mechanical heartbeat of a machine she trusted more than most people. The tower cleared her for departure. She taxied slowly, Thorne's weight shifting on the landing gear, and positioned herself at the runway threshold. The sky ahead was bruised purple, clouds hanging low like a threat. Rivka keyed the radio. Bagram Tower, Warhawk ready for departure. Warhawk cleared for takeoff. Winds 270 at 12 knots, good hunting. She advanced the throttles. The A-10 surged forward, ungainly and powerful, eating runway until physics relented and the aircraft lifted, nose angling toward the clouds. The gear retracted with a heavy thunk. The world fell away. Rivka climbed through the murk, instruments glowing in the dim cockpit, her hands light on the controls. The A-10 wasn't graceful. It didn't need to be. It was built to take punishment and deliver worse. She broke through the cloud deck at 7,500 feet, sunlight spilling across the canopy. Below, the clouds churned, a sea of gray hiding the violence underneath. She leveled off, trimming the aircraft, and set course for Kunar. The flight took 30 minutes, terrain scrolling beneath like a topographical map come to life. Mountains rose in jagged waves, valleys shadowed and cold. Rivers threaded through rock, thin and silver. Rivka checked her weapons, full load of 30mm, 2 Maverick missiles and a pair of rocket pods, enough to ruin someone's day. The radio crackled. Warhawk, this is Delta 4 actual. We're taking effective fire from the North Ridge. Approximately 20 hostiles, small arms and machine guns. Request immediate support. Rivka's voice remained steady. Delta 4, Warhawk inbound your position. ETA 2 minutes. Mark your location. Popping purple smoke. She descended, pushing through the clouds, the world turning gray and formless. Altimeter unwinding. Visibility near zero. She flew on instruments and instinct, trusting the machine, trusting herself. Then she broke through. The valley opened beneath her, narrow and violent. Purple smoke rose in a thin column from a cluster of rocks. Around it, muzzle flashes sparkled. Rivka banked hard, eyes scanning, sorting targets from terrain. The enemy positions were dug in along the ridgeline, fortified behind stone and sandbags. Smart, disciplined, she keyed the radio. Delta 4, Warhawk has visual, confirm North Ridge is hostile. Affirmative, North Ridge is hostile. We are south side, marked with IR strobes. Copy, guns in 30 seconds. She rolled the aircraft, lining up her approach, the gun sight pipper dancing over the ridge. Range closed. She squeezed the trigger. The Avenger spoke. 70 rounds per second, each one depleted uranium, capable of punching through armor like cardboard. The ridgeline disintegrated. Stone exploded, bodies ragdolled, weapons shattered. The roar was apocalyptic, a sound that belonged to mythology, not modern warfare. She pulled up, the A-10 shuddering, and circled back. Tracers reached for her, green lines arcing through the air. She ignored them. Return fire was part of the job. She adjusted her angle, compensating for wind, and fired again. Another section of ridge collapsed. The enemy broke, fleeing down the backside of the mountain, and Rivka let them go. Her job wasn't to chase, it was to protect. Delta 4, ridge is clear, say status. Warhawk, you are a beautiful human being. 4 wounded, stable, we're ready for extract. Roger, I'll hold the perimeter until the Hellos arrive. She climbed to 1,000 feet, circling the valley in a lazy orbit, eyes constantly moving. Below, the Delta team gathered their wounded, prepping for extraction. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching. Then the Blackhawks appeared, 2 of them flying low and fast. Rivka coordinated their approach, ensuring the LZ remained cold. The Hellos touched down, rotor wash kicking up dust and debris. The wounded were loaded quickly, professionally. 30 seconds later, they were airborne again, climbing out of the valley. Rivka escorted them to the edge of the operational area, a silent guardian, then peeled off. Delta 4, Warhawk departing station. Stay safe. Copy, Warhawk, thanks for the save. She didn't respond. She never knew what to say to gratitude. She pointed Thorn toward home and climbed back into the clouds. The return flight was quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy. Rivka's body ached, vertebrae grinding with every shift in G-force, but she didn't acknowledge it. Pain was old news, a constant companion she'd learned to ignore. She descended through the clouds, Bagram appearing as a sprawl of concrete and dust. She radioed the tower, received clearance, and brought the A-10 in smooth, tires chirping against asphalt. Shutdown was methodical. Engines spooled down, systems powered off, canopy opened. She climbed out slowly, joints protesting, and walked the pre-flight inspection in reverse, checking for damage, nodding the scorched barrels of the Avenger. Ground crew approached, chattering about the mission, but she waved them off politely. She needed quiet, needed to decompress. In the ready room, Hale waited. Heard it went smooth. Rivka shrugged. Smooth enough. Delta team's calling you a legend. Delta team's delirious. Hale handed her a bottle of water. She took it, drinking deeply, the coolness cutting through the dryness in her throat. You know the talk's going to spread, Hale said. You're 3 for 3 since coming back. People are starting to notice. People always notice the wrong things. Hale studied her, trying to read the woman beneath the fatigue. What would be the right thing? She set the bottle down, meeting his gaze. That I'm just doing the job. It was honest, and Hale respected that. But he also knew that just doing the job didn't capture what she did. There was a precision to her flying, a refusal to waste motion or ordnance that set her apart. She flew like someone who understood that every second mattered, every decision carried weight. It wasn't recklessness. It was mastery. Later that evening, word of the mission filtered through the squadron. Pilots gathered in the lounge, discussing the engagement, the way Warhawk had threaded the valley under fire, the calmness of her radio calls. Even Voss, still bruised from his earlier misstep, listened quietly, his skepticism eroding under the weight of evidence. Akafer caught his eye. Still think she's washed up? Voss didn't answer immediately. Then, reluctantly, no. It was the closest he'd come to admitting he was wrong. Days blurred into a rhythm. Missions came and went, some routine, others brutal. Rivka flew them all with the same detached competence, her presence becoming a fixture in the operational cadence of the base. She didn't seek attention, but it found her anyway. Pilots started asking her advice on approach angles, ordnance selection, how to stay calm when the radios screamed and the world turned into fire. She answered when asked, her explanations terse but clear. She didn't sugarcoat, didn't motivate. She just told them what worked and what got you killed. Respect grew quietly among those who understood what flying close air support meant. They saw the way she studied maps late into the night, memorizing terrain features, planning contingencies. They noticed how she walked the flight line in the early mornings, inspecting Thorn with the care of a jeweler examining diamonds. They understood, without needing to say it, that she wasn't just competent. She was committed, but not everyone saw it. Command was a different world, populated by officers who measured success in statistics and readiness reports. To them, Rivka was a liability. She'd been medically compromised. her injury a red flag that insurance adjusters and risk managers worried over. There were whispers about replacing her, bringing in a younger pilot without the baggage of a fractured spine and a reputation for being difficult. Colonel Hale pushed back, citing her mission record, the lives saved, the consistent results. But the whispers persisted. One afternoon, Hale called her into his office. She arrived on time, expression neutral, and sat without being asked. Hale looked tired, older than his years. "I'm going to be straight with you," he said. "There's pressure from higher up to rotate you out. They're worried about your medical status, the risk of another incident." Rivka's face didn't change. "I'm cleared for flight." "I know, but cleared and preferred are different things. They want someone they don't have to worry about." "Then they should stop worrying." Hale almost laughed, but it came out as a sigh. "It's not that simple." "It is." She leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but firm. "Every pilot out here is one bad day from being grounded. Injury, fatigue, mental breakdown. I've already had my bad day, I came back. That makes me more reliable, not less." Hale wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. She was right in a way that defied bureaucratic logic. "They want a replacement lined up," he said. "Someone younger, less complicated." Complicated. For the first time there was an edge in her voice. "I show up, I fly, I bring people home." "If that's complicated, maybe the problem isn't me." Hale rubbed his face, exhausted by a fight he didn't choose. "I'm on your side, Rivka, but I'm not the only one making decisions." She stood, her movements controlled, deliberate. "Then let my record speak. Every mission, every sortie, if they want me gone, they'll have to make me leave." She walked out, leaving Hale alone with the uncomfortable truth that she was probably the best pilot he had, and the system was trying to discard her anyway. Outside, the sky was fading into dusk, the mountains outlined against the last light. Rivka walked to the flight line, standing near Thorn. The aircraft looked tired, scarred like her. She placed a hand on the fuselage, feeling the cool metal beneath her palm. "Not done yet," she murmured, unsure if she was talking to the machine or herself. The next morning brought a new mission, this one more complex. Intelligence reported a convoy moving through a mountain pass, suspected of transporting weapons to insurgent groups. The convoy was well defended, traveling during daylight to avoid aerial surveillance. Taking it out required coordination between multiple assets, drones for reconnaissance, fast movers for initial strikes, and close air support to finish the job. Rivka was assigned as secondary CAS, backup to an F-16 flown by Lieutenant Voss. The briefing was tense. Voss had been flying more missions, his confidence returning, but there was still unease between him and Rivka. They operated in different worlds, his focused on speed and altitude, hers on persistence and proximity. Hale laid out the plan. "Drones will track the convoy. Voss, you'll hit the lead and tail vehicles with JDAMs, box them in. Warhawk, you follow up, eliminate remaining targets. Timing is critical. Civilians use that pass, so PID is mandatory." Voss nodded, eager. Rivka remained still, absorbing details. After the brief, Voss approached her, awkward but sincere. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot. I said things I shouldn't have." Rivka glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You're young, you'll learn." It wasn't quite an acceptance, but it wasn't dismissal either. Voss took it as progress. They launched within the hour, Voss in his F-16, sleek and fast, climbing rapidly to altitude. Rivka followed in Thorn, slower, heavier, but relentless. She settled into a holding pattern at 12,000 feet above the weather, waiting for the call. The drone feed came through, grainy but clear. A convoy of 6 trucks moving steadily through the pass. No civilians visible, no livestock, just armed men and cargo beds covered with tarps. Hale's voice came through the command net. "Vanguard 1, you are cleared hot. Engage lead and tail vehicles." Voss acknowledged, his voice tight with focus. Rivka listened as he lined up his attack, the F-16's targeting pod locking onto the first truck. "Vanguard 1 rifle." The JDAM detached, a precision-guided bomb falling in silence. 15 seconds later, the lead truck exploded, a fireball erupting on the narrow road, debris scattered. The convoy halted. Voss circled back, locking onto the rear vehicle. Rifle. Another explosion. The convoy was boxed in, trapped between burning wrecks and sheer cliffs. Men poured out of the remaining trucks, taking cover, weapons raised. Hale's voice again. Warhawk, you're cleared hot. Eliminate remaining vehicles. Watch for dismounts. Rivka descended, dropping through the clouds, eyes scanning. The pass stretched below her, a thin ribbon of road carved into rock. Smoke rose from the destroyed trucks. Between them, 4 intact vehicles and at least a dozen armed men. She rolled in, adjusting her dive angle, gun sight settling on the second truck. The Avenger roared. 30mm rounds chewed through metal and flesh. The truck exploded, secondary detonations suggesting ammunition or fuel. She pulled up, banking hard, tracers following her path. Someone had a heavy machine gun. Rivka ignored the fire, her focus absolute. She circled back, identifying the gun position, and fired a Maverick missile. The weapon streaked down, slamming into the rock outcropping where the gun emplacement sat. The explosion was massive, shaking the valley. Silence followed. She checked her instruments, fuel and ammunition levels, then keyed the radio. Bagram actual, Warhawk, convoy destroyed, no movement on the ground. Voss's voice cut in, admiration clear. Damn, Warhawk. Remind me not to piss you off. Rivka didn't respond. She climbed back to altitude, circling until the drone confirmed all targets eliminated. Then she set course for home, Voss falling in beside her. They flew in formation, 2 aircraft separated by doctrine and design but united by mission. Back at Bagram, the debrief was quick. Hale commended both pilots, noting the efficiency of the strike. Voss grinned, riding the adrenaline high. Rivka remained composed, already thinking about the next mission, the next threat. As they left the briefing room, Voss spoke again. You know, I think I'm starting to get it. Why you fly the way you do. Rivka paused, glancing at him. And how's that? Like it matters. She considered the words, then nodded once. It does. That night, word of the convoy strike spread through the base. Pilots talked about the precision, the coordination, the way Warhawk had cleaned up the pass without hesitation. Respect solidified into something more tangible. She wasn't just competent. She was essential, but Rivka didn't hear the talk. She was in her quarters, reviewing mission footage, analyzing her approach angles, looking for mistakes. She found 3. A moment where she'd misjudged wind speed, a delay in target acquisition, a rocket fired when a burst from the Avenger would have sufficed. She noted them, filed them away, determined not to repeat them. Outside, the base hummed with the sounds of war. Generators, distant rotors, the low murmur of exhausted voices. Rivka lay back on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, and wondered how much longer she could keep this pace. The body was willing, but it was also honest. Pain flared nightly, deep in her spine, radiating down her legs. She took pills, just enough to dull the edge, never enough to impair her flying. It was a balance, precarious and necessary. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, she dreamed of the sky. Not the beautiful sky of postcards, but the working sky, gray and cold, where altitude was safety and gravity was the enemy. She dreamed of the moment when the stick felt like an extension of her hand, when the aircraft became part of her nervous system, when she and Thorne moved as one. It was the only place she felt complete. Morning came with another mission, then another. Days stacked into weeks. Rivka flew them all, her presence becoming synonymous with reliability. If Warhawk was overhead, you were going to be okay. That became the unspoken truth, whispered among ground troops and repeated in after-action reports. But the whispers reached higher command as well, and not everyone was pleased. General Sutton, the officer who'd cleared her return to flight status, received a memo questioning the decision. It cited risk assessments, medical concerns, the liability of having a pilot with documented injuries in a high-tempo combat zone. Sutton read the memo twice, then filed it in the trash. He'd flown combat himself, back when close air support meant slower aircraft and higher casualties. He understood what Rivka brought to the fight, and he wasn't willing to sacrifice effectiveness for bureaucratic comfort. But the memo was a warning. The pressure was building. One evening, after a particularly brutal mission that left her aircraft riddled with small arms fire, Rivka returned to base and found Hale waiting. He looked grim. "We need to talk." She followed him into his office, fatigue weighing on every step. Hale closed the door, leaning against his desk. Sutton called. "He's pushing back, but the brass is serious about rotating you out. They want you stateside, training role, maybe a staff position. Rivkaz's jaw tightened. I don't do staff positions. I know, but you might.